talk about some of the key endgames that definitely will help you to become a better player. So we are going to start with some classics. Here in this position, I'm sure you're going to get there more than once when playing chess games, how to properly defend this position. So white is pushing forward here, we are defending this position and make sure that you are not going to lose. So there is one thing you have to remember. The thing number one, actually there's going to be a couple of things probably. Thing number one is never allow your king, your opponent's king in front of the passed pawn. So that's why always keep close the king to this pawn. So do not run to the back rank as quickly as possible, but try to stay as close as you can. Why? You're going to see it a bit later. So we keep the king close. Keep the king close. And whenever you have this position where both of your kings and the passed pawn are positioned on the same file, always retreat at the same file. Always. You're going to see it later why. I mean, in the beginning, it doesn't matter, but following the same principle, the correct principle is a good thing to do. So white advances, we keep the king close to the pawn, we never retreat too far. Again, retreat at the same file. So the king advances, we go back at the same file. Now finally you're going to see why. Now we have a choice. Here, here, or here. You should just know it's always keep the king at the same file as the passed pawn. Now why? Because you're escaping with a stalemate on the board. If your opponent is not advancing to these squares and he's walking someplace else, he's going here, you always go straight back. And you always go back straight. If he again waits, you go back and you walk straight back. So king goes here, here. If he retreats, you go back to e7. And again, it's a stalemate. So if you don't do this and you mix up and you accidentally retreat on the wrong square, the point is, what is winning? Because now you have to go here and the white just promotes. Very important in game. One of the key positions in any pawn in game. There will be exceptions, like with the H pawn and A pawn, those corner pawns, when it doesn't matter. I mean, you can basically just ignore. Immediately run to this corner. Why? Because even if your opponent puts the king in front and does something, he can't make any progress because he can't push you out of the corner. So this is the moment when you can just ignore whatever I said in previous position, just walk with the king close to the corner and just stay there. It only works with H and A pawns. One of the most important things to understand about these passed pawns is that opposition plays a huge role. And that's why one of the stronger techniques for the stronger side is putting the king in front of the passed pawn to push back the defending king. Now, this is a very, very critical idea. So you see black has retreated the king very far. I suggested you not to do it. Now you're going to see why. If you're defender side, don't do this. So white is going to go king e2, and it's all about getting access to these key squares. c4, d4, e4. And you're going to see why. So we go here, we advance the king, and now we go king e4. Now we go to the key square, we go king d4, and now this is what we call opposition. So we have built an opposition against the black king, and the black king has to move. This is very, very important. It's the black king who has to move. So we go here, and now we advance the pawn. We advance the pawn here. We build the opposition. We go the other way. The d pawn advances. Now you might argue, wait a second, there might be some nuances. I'm sure they are. So let's say black waits. And if you go king d4, king d6, now it's black who set up an opposition against you. But we can still play the quiet move d3, which changes everything. And now the position becomes winning. Because no matter which direction your opponent goes, you go the other way. So he goes here, we go here. He goes here. We don't allow the opponent to build the opposition. This would be a draw. If you have to move in this position, it's just a draw. So that's why here again, we put the opposition, we go around, we push the pawn, and we build the opposition. Again, the king has to move. Let's say this time he goes here, we go here, we promote. Pretty easy. Let me show you more examples of this key idea. Now you see these key squares. Now you see these are c5, d5, and e5 squares that are marked in with a green circle. So here we are gonna run with those pawns as quickly, with the king as quickly as possible to those squares. King e7, king e4. Let's say black plays. Yeah. By the way, yeah, this we are not getting to those critical squares. So if black plays king e6, then after king d4, king d6, you see black set up the opposition himself. And if black instead makes the mistake and he plays king d6 instead, now we build the opposition. Now we go around. Now we go around. Again, you see the king for black has to move. We go either left or right, depending which is the direction that black king takes, and we're winning this. So black can still draw this. Now another position here is when the pawn is on the fourth rank. Again, we're trying to advance with the king as quickly as possible. We go here, and black has to be pretty careful. This is what we call the distant opposition. So black goes king e8. Again, you see, it's very easy for black to lose. Black goes king d7, we go king d5. It's the opposition, black has to move. Black goes king e7, we go king e5. King d7, king d5. Black has to move, black loses. That's why there's this very important term called the distant opposition. Black is pretty smart about it. He plays king e8 to meet king e5 with king e7. And now it's for us to move, and it's just a draw. So here, 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 here. Now you already know this technique. You already know this. You studied this before. So, and again, if black here is careless, after king e5, he plays, for example, king d8, huge mistake. We build the opposition. Now we're winning. So I hope you better understand this difference when the stronger side is winning with the king in front, and when the stronger side is unable to win, it's just a draw. And another example here. So you see, we can't win because those key squares are c7, d7, e7 squares in the green circle. We just can't possibly get there. I mean, we can of course try, but if black is aware how to build up a proper defense, he goes again a straight line back. King goes here, d7, it ends with a stalemate. Let's talk about something else, some other important things you have to know, and that is the so-called square rule. Now, how can you very quickly determine if the passed pawn is going to make it to the queens or if the black king is going to catch it? This is the so-called square. So you see, I have just drawn an imaginary square on the board, and the point is, if this king is not going to make it inside the square with the next move, he can't catch those pawns. So here, you see, the square is getting smaller and smaller, and that's it, white just promotes. So we go back here, and if I would start with h3, which is, of course, a ridiculous move. Black plays king c8, let me draw the square. Now he's in. Yeah, so h4, here, h5, here, h6, here, h7, just in time. So that's why sometimes it's very important to try to draw this imaginary square. It might be enough also just draw the diagonal. You see this green diagonal, that if the king cannot touch it, he's not going to catch the pawn. There are exceptions, very interesting exceptions. By the way, this is a very famous study by Richard Reti, where this king is, after h5, this king is so far from the h pawn and still he can catch it. Why? Because he can build a magical square involving the pawn on c6. Look at this. It's pretty amazing. So white plays king g7, h4, white plays king c6, h3, and now comes king e7. We're advancing this pawn. So let's say h2, c7, king d7, and white escapes with a draw. You're like, wait a second, I had like 2 moves. Yeah, so what if I try not to go h3, I try to go, I try not to go h4, maybe I try to go here. And now comes the key idea. We go here. If black accepts the pawn, we are in the square. We catch the pawn. So if black pushes this pawn, now we go here. And we advance this pawn again. h2, c7, king b7, king d7. It's a draw. It's an amazing position. Now let's have a look at more examples here. And one of the big elements that you'll have to know about endgames is the Zugzwang. Because Zugzwang very often decides who's going to win and who's going to lose. So here we have white to move. Do we play king c6 or king c5? One of the moves wins, one of the moves loses. So king c5 is the obvious move, but it actually loses. Why? Because now white is in the Zugzwang. He has to move. He loses the pawn on d4 and black wins. So the correct move is king c6. Hitting the pawn like this. The point is forcing the king for black to go on e4. And now we play king c5, forcing the black king to be in Zugzwang. So this is like a mutual Zugzwang for both players. If any of them moves right now, they lose. That's very often what pawn endgames are all about. You see, now we're just transposing to winning endgame. Let's talk about more. Let's talk about another example of the Zugzwang. Now, black is the move. So the pawn on h4 is under attack. You're thinking, what's so special? You know, I'm gonna take the pawn on h4, and after king f6, I'm gonna go here. So king g6, take it. This is just a draw. h4, f5, h6, here. Draw, right? Actually, no. After king g4, as you already saw, we can set up a Zugzwang for white. Because if white goes here, we take it, this pawn. And then we go back, and this king cannot stop the h-pawn. Even though if this is the h-pawn and normally this is draw, this king cannot get to h1 square. Here. Black is blocking the path to the king, and this pawn is advancing. It's a very interesting exception. So here after king g4, let's say white would try to go here. Now we take it, and after f5, again, the white king is not going to make it to the h1 square. Let's talk about the pawn endgames. Obviously, whenever you are having an extra material, you are interested to go to a pawn endgame, try to trade off everything, so that you can create an outside pass pawn here at the queen side and win it. But very often you can also use this extra pawn at a queen side, for example, like here, as a bait. What I'm talking about. So we are about to push these pawns. Black is going to take care of these of this pass pawn, and now we are going to use this pass pawn and the queen set as a bait to run with the king here and collect these pawns. So black cannot ignore this pawn because otherwise we just promote, and then we use this pawn as a bait to capitalize on the pawns at the king side. Let me just show you how it could be done. King e4, let's say g6, doesn't really matter. White also could have started b4, a4, b5, a5, and just advance. So here, sometimes you could remember some other rules like b4, then king d4, trade this pawn. The king is not getting close, while black is going to get busy, try to stop this pawn. Now you run here with the king, collect these pawns. And if the king runs back, we use this pawn as a bait. That's it. There are some endgames that you have to know that are not winning, even if you have extra material, like this one. So we have an extra bishop, an extra pawn, and we can't win it. Why? Because we call this the wrong corner of the pass pawn. Meaning, these endgames are only winning with a side pawn when the stronger side has the bishop of this color. Like here, the dark square bishop. Why this is not winning? Because this will end with a stalemate. You can't possibly get the black king out of the corner. I mean, as much as you would love to, There have been attempts, believe me. You can't get it out. And if the king cannot get out, the next thing you're going to see is going to be a stalemate. So h7 is a stalemate, or you allow the king to go here. You just can't make a progress. The same thing could happen also to the other side. So this pawn could be an h pawn. But here, with the dark square bishop also, this pawn would be not advancing. Also, there's some positions you have to know about the queen versus the pawn in games. This is a position where basically with the green arrow, those are the squares that the stronger side is winning. And with the red arrow, the A, C, F, and H pawns on the 7th rank, or here it's a second rank actually, it's a draw. And why this is a winning? Because white inevitably, no matter how far is the king, white advances. White simply is going to advance, give a lot of checks, force the king, always go in front of the passed pawn, the king advances. Again, start to force the king in front of the pawn, the king advances, force the king in front of the pawn, the king advances. So there's nothing the defender's side can do. Again, a check, advance the king, and just a mate on the board. This is the fastest way to play, but of course you can just collect the pawn and then simply checkmate with a queen against the bare king. This is an exception. Like with the h pawn standing on the 2nd or the 7th rank here or here and the king close, you can't do the same technique. Why? The key difference is the stalemate. Look at this. Check, 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 here, and you can't advance the king. That's it. You go here, this king is in a stalemate. You can't possibly make any progress. Here, the king's never going to go here. King h1, you have to move the queen. Here or here, it doesn't matter. It's a stalemate on the board. Also is a stalemate with either c or f pawns. Same idea. But you get to this position. The point is the defender side is never going to go here with the king. Instead, he's going to go to the corner. Now, you can't take the pawn. It's a stalemate. You can't also advance the king. The pawn promotes. That's why these are the exceptions that you should know with the A, C, F, and H pawns. If the stronger side's king is very far away, you can't win these endgames. And there, of course, are exceptions. And the exception is all about how close the king already is. So here, white, even with the pawn standing on h2 and a king on g2, can still win this position. Because we are going to allow black to promote. Feels like a draw, right? No, this is not a draw. Why? Because now with a king on g3 and a queen on e7, we're dominating the queen. You see, this is simply a mate threatened, and black gonna do nothing to give any checks. So queen b7, a queen goes away, and we simply deliver a mate on the board. So there's no checks, no nothing. So this queen in the corner is imprisoned, and despite the fact that we have the same amount of material on the board that normally would be a draw, this is an exception, and black loses. Also quite similar here is that with this f pawn, black is thinking about putting the king in the corner. He has to be very accurate and go king h1 immediately. But you see the king is so close. Now this idea of putting the king on g3 is not going to work because black has checks. But if black is careless and he plays king g1, now same idea again is going to work. We advance the king closer. This queen cannot give any checks. As you can see, there's no checks, no checks, no checks. And queen h7 or whatever checkmate is going to be immediately imminent. That's it. So those are the most important things you have to know about some of the most played endgames. Hope you will remember them and use them in your own games. Good luck.